Hello and welcome to Lancaster Hi-Fi. I've got the better part of a Saturday. In my day job, I have to take a class out on a field trip tomorrow, which is Sunday. But I've got today, and I want to get some work done on some equipment. Now this particular tube amp has kind of given me conniptions. I don't know what to do with it. The kind of sound it's producing, most people wouldn't find anything wrong with it. But on the oscilloscope, I can see that at higher frequencies, and not even all that high, it's got slewing distortion. That occurs when at higher frequencies, the rising part of the waveform, and of course the falling part too, because it's push-pull, that rise is faster than the electronics can do. And so it ends up sort of zigzagging, not quite reaching the peak before it starts falling again, and vice versa. The frequencies that are being introduced and the frequencies that are being distorted are at the upper end of our hearing. So it generally kind of sounds okay, especially for acoustic music, but it's not acceptable. The problem with fixing it is that it may require a basic redesign of the circuit. Now this circuit was supposed to simply be a clone of the Harman Kardon A300. I don't know whether the slewing distortion is a fundamental problem with that Harman Kardon circuit. It may be, in which case I need to just scrap the circuit design and, I don't know, maybe not start over completely, but consider something fundamentally different. One thing I've thought of is trying to make a 6v6. Okay, so this amplifier uses 6v6 output tubes. A 6v6 version of the Bevois Valley or Beaver Valley amplifier, which features EL84 or 6BQ5 output tubes. But it also features different input stage tubes, these E88CCs, otherwise known as 6DJ8s, I believe. This amplifier is just sublime. It's one of those amplifiers. I made it, essentially with the intention of selling it at some point soon. But it's so nice, and it's so much better than any of the other tube amps that I have. I don't know if I'm going to be able to let it go. But it would be nice if I could employ similar circuit design methodology to redesign the circuit in the 6v6 amp here. And then I've got this other amp, this jukebox amp, the R2620, which has relatively unusual or relatively rare output tubes, 7868s, 12AX7s on the input stage. And it also has slewing distortion. Again, I don't know whether that's a problem with my implementation of the circuit or whether that was just something that the jukebox amp designers didn't care about. So it may just not be a very good circuit, in which case that also needs a redesign. And trying to redesign a circuit is a lot of mental effort that, my day job has been using up all my mental effort, and my mind has been exhausted when I've had the time to consider these redesigns, so I haven't gotten to those. So I think I'm going to shelve these two tube amps until I have time and resources to devote to rethinking them. Which brings me then to, what do I do today? Let's go back out to where I store my stuff and where my test rig is. Here's the various sound equipment here. My son's band. It seems to have disbanded. And here we are. Let's get some lights. So here's my test rig, the Realistic Lab 400. And this Magnavox CD player, which is also giving me problems. I either need to replace the disk drive mechanism or something. The Fisher preamp right now, the power amp that's plugged in is the DGSE1. This is a very nice amplifier, and it's in good working condition, so I'm pretty pleased with it as well. I've got down here this big Adcom solid state amp. Anyway, here's the shelves full of potential projects. or projects underway or in various stages. The last one that I put here on the shelf was my Sansui receiver that I've loved a lot. I was using it for a little while as the preamp for the Beaver Valley amp, but it's not loud enough. Its preamp has a lower level than the Beaver Valley really needs. The Beaver Valley sensitivity is 2 volts RMS, and this one only puts out a max, I think, like 500. It doesn't put out a high enough level from the phono preamp to get the Beaver Valley as loud as I would like it to be. The Sansui also has a hum that I think might be fixed with at least 1 or 2 new filter capacitors, and I've got those now and plan to replace those at some point soon. So that would be a relatively simple thing to get done. Similarly, this Dynaco, I spent a lot of time when I totally overhauled this a while back. Well, I put in an extra filter capacitor in addition to the original. The original filter capacitor failed. And so now I need to replace that original filter capacitor so that it gets back to as quiet as it was when I first overhauled it. This is a relatively recent purchase. Picked up this Realistic STA 2000 75 watt per channel amplifier. Picked this up for $50 because it's not in working condition and it's pretty rough on the exterior too. But I think the exterior on this is serviceable. That is, it's filthy. There's some chips in the wood, veneer, but I think that can all be fixed. The faceplate can be cleaned. There are no broken knobs. All the knobs are there. And so I believe that can be brought back to like new appearance. Similarly, the wood panels on the side can be rehabilitated, re-veneered maybe, or at least the veneer patched to look awesome. But that's going to be a lot of work. There's also a lot that's wrong with the interior. I believe it's going to need a new relay, for example, and that's not something that I've done before, actually. Let's see, what else have we got here? We've got the Pioneer SX780 that I had up in my living room system for a while. I've got new filter capacitors that I'm going to put in here. There's this Nico that I've put a lot of work into, but it still isn't quite right. And I need to figure out what's wrong with that. I did also get new filter capacitors for it, but it also needs something that I'm not sure what that something is, whether it's simply cleaning these front panel switches better than I had previously. That seems likely to be the problem, actually. Or replacing transistors. So a lot of old solid-state equipment has transistors that are known to go bad over the years. I've looked into that for this one. It either doesn't really have any of those sort of known to go bad transistors, or it has very few of them. So that's probably not the problem. But it could be. I think there might be 1 or 2 transistors in there that might stand to be replaced. Here's what I think I'm going to start work on today. This is the Pioneer PL530. Nice old turntable. I've cleaned it up quite a bit to make it look nice. And it functions. It functions pretty well right now. But not perfectly. The tone arm lowers way, way too slowly. And why do I know that it lowers too slowly? I mean, is it a terrible thing for the tone arm to lower slowly? I'll tell you why I know it's too slow in this case is that this turntable has a mechanism similar to the Realistic Lab 400 that mutes the output until the needle touches down. But that's not a case where it's designed such that it detects the needle having touched down and then unmutes. It's simply like the Lab, if it's like the Lab 400, it's simply got a cam in there, and after a certain period of time, it unmutes. Whereas the tone arm lowering is regulated by a spring and the lube on a shaft. And so if that lube has gotten kind of crusty, then it's going to lower more slowly than it takes for the cam to get around to unmuting. So that tone arm's definitely lowering too slowly. I've also considered, and I found online a guide on audiokarma.org, I found a guide for dismantling this turntable in order to re-veneer it. And I do have some cherry veneer similar to the cherry veneer that I put on the Lab 400. It's actually sitting up there on top of that old freezer. That might be nice to re-veneer this Pioneer PL530 with cherry veneer. The vinyl's not in terrible shape, but it's not in great shape either. It's kind of chipped and peeling a little bit here and there. In order for me to consider that really nice tip-top shape, I'm going to need to redo the veneer. But it also needs an overall servicing inside. I don't know just how complicated it is in there. It's probably of similar complicatedness to the Lab 400, I'm guessing. Probably not nearly as complicated as the PL630. Well, there's this Pioneer. Which one is this? This is the SX990. It needs some work. I think it needs a bunch of new transistors. It doesn't sound very good right now, and I don't know exactly why not. Its issue is not with the power amplifier, the main amp. It's with the preamp, and it's probably, if I had to guess, it's probably specifically with the phono preamp. The phono preamp is very sensitive to component value drift, specifically the capacitors and resistors that make up the RIAA equalization. If those component values drift a bit, then you get weird frequency band dropouts and things like that, and that's what's happening here. It's got sort of a weird frequency, sort of upper mids dropping out, so the vocals tend to sort of disappear in certain ranges. Oh boy, there's this Harman Kardon down here that I sort of agonized over. The FM tuner at least doesn't work very well at all, doesn't really pull in any stations, and I haven't been able to track down the problem. I may just replace a bunch of transistors to see if that fixes things. I haven't really wanted to do it because it's just a kind of a nightmare problem that I haven't been able to solve. And I think I also have new filter capacitors for that Pioneer SX990. I also have new filter capacitors for this Pioneer SX440. This one could use some work, but it's in pretty good working order right now, so I don't necessarily want to mess with it too much, but replacing the filter capacitors would probably be a good idea. And I've got some tube amp chassis here. This one I'm going to turn into a DGSE1, but I need to get a few parts. Specifically, I think all I need are some trimming pots for setting the bias. There's this other single-ended amp. This came from a Westinghouse console. I've never worked on a Westinghouse, and it's got unusual output tubes, so I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do with this one yet. I've got various turntables. This turntable's in pretty good shape as I recall. I just need to do some repainting of the bottom plate where there was some rust that I removed. Got these tape decks. The tape decks are a bit of a puzzle. I don't know if the tape heads are worn or simply out of alignment, but what seems to happen with almost all of these tape decks is that they'll end up favoring one channel substantially over the other. I'm not sure what can be done about that. All I've learned about is how to detect it. That's not my concern. I know it's off, but I don't know how to fix it, and I guess that's a matter of doing some research and figuring out whether the heads actually need to be replaced or whether they simply need to be realigned, and how to do that. Here's a Magnavox CD player that I bought thinking to do a resto mod on it, but since the previous couple of resto mod CD player things that I've done haven't been completely successful, I just have not wanted to mess with it. It works mostly right now. Here we've got a preamp. I got this for $10. I've done a video on it, maybe two. The phono preamp on it needs work. Maybe even needs redesign. And then this Adcom preamp, which is a great preamp if it only worked. It works, but in order to use it, you have to be willing to put up with the fact that it won't turn off, and that the FM tuning is kind of haywire. Like all these lights stay on. These are all the FM presets and they all stay on. Kind of a problem. I'm not sure what to do about this ADCOM. All the way down here is this Rotel CD player. Very nice CD player that I resto-modded. I upgraded the op amps, put new extra capacitors on the buffers for the DAC, but the mechanism's not working. It was working fine until I shipped it to Arkansas, and upon arriving in Arkansas, it did not work correctly. So, joy of joys. Here's a Marantz CD player that I bought, thinking it was a different Marantz CD player than it was. It turns out there are at least a couple of different versions of the CD40, and this is not the one that I wanted. And so I started taking it apart, found that the DAC chips were not the ones that I thought they were going to be, and just kind of put it back on the shelf, partially disassembled, because I just didn't have the motivation at that point to fix it, because it wasn't working completely well. That's not everything, but like I said, I think I'm gonna probably go with the PL530 for now. I don't know, maybe the Nico. Actually, I think I have a good idea of how to maybe make that work now without too much trouble. Maybe I'll give that a shot. That would be a nice, satisfying thing to get done. I'm going to sign off for now. Like, comment, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. Hope you enjoy the video. Tune in again, please.